we need to open in prayer, and then we will nominate someone as chairman. Father, we thank you for this beautiful day, and we pray that as we come here tonight to discuss county business, that you will give us the wisdom and the strength to do the right thing in all the decisions that we make here tonight. In all these things, we give you praise. Amen. All right. I nominate Jerry Becker as chairman. And there's a motion and a second. Any other nominations? Then we will close nominations. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? If that wasn't a railroad job, I don't know.
Wait, Jerry, do you accept?
Yes.
Too late now.
Yeah.
You're in the right seat for it, so there you go.
I was wondering, Mr. Hyde asked me to sit on this.
Subconsciously.
So I guess let's back up a little. Did we get an approval of the agenda, or I missed that one?
No, we haven't done anything
but
but
invocation.
I'm
invocation.
just going through the. So is there approval for the agenda?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Recognition of public, no one in the public. Approval of minutes, July 29, 2024. I'm not sure who is Mr. Hyde. You were on that committee. What is it when we approve it?
Y'all can vote as the form.
Yeah.
So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve it.
Can I just ask, Mr. Hyde, are these minutes accurate? Sure they're.
To the best of my knowledge.
Excellent. I also voted for them.
All right. Any other questions, discussion there? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. We've already done E. Is there a nomination
I
for?
move to appoint Terry Boyd as vice chair.
There's a motion for any other nominees?
Second.
Seeing no other, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that's unanimous. For the committee chairman, I do not have a specific report. County mayor is not here. I'm not sure.
He told me in the parking lot he had another meeting he's heading toward.
Okay. Report of the finance director.
The first thing is page 3 through 5, and it is actually the official resolution for the audit committee that points out the members. It was in your packet, points out the duties. And following that immediately on page 6 through 8 is the statutes that the actual resolution is outlining that the committee is responsible for. Did everybody have a chance to read it? Does anybody have any questions as far as for me before we?
I read it today. I didn't have any questions. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Long about that information?
I have one question on section 6 with that adequately funded means. Maybe not, this is just a,
Which page number are you on?
it's at the, ratify the audit committee of Sumner County's page 5, I guess.
If you read part of the statute and the resolution, it allows for a financial expert.
Oh, if we wanted to bring one in, well, that may actually.
You can or cannot pay, but the question, I'm not really sure.
Internal audits.
I've always
Some counties have an internal audit.
did that, put in as the expert.
Okay.
Yeah, there is. We do have the ability to hire someone else.
Without a commission vote.
You would have to have funding, but you would have to, you'd appropriate it just like everything else. But,
So you have to ask for it with 13
Yeah.
votes.
in the budget, yeah.
I just was interested in what that meant.
So any specific takeaways on this that you think might be confusing or from any other recent discussions that you had?
Nothing that anybody's called or discussed or have any questions about other than other than just the question was posed just a second ago.
All right. Moving on to item B.
Item B is actually the audit findings, and this year you had 2 audit findings to kind of give you a perspective. 2008, the year before I arrived, we had 21 findings. I came in March, we were down to 12 findings. The following year, we were 5 findings, with 2 being to finance, which involved library receipting and personnel policies. And most years were at 0. This year, it was involving that we did not close, all the county's books has to be closed within 60 days of the end of the fiscal year. Our fixed assets, which are actually on our books, we book them to do our entity-wide conversions. We did not get closed to later because of a couple issues. One, we had a fair amount of difficulty getting some of the information from the operating departments because they were busy, and then we were engaged in other stuff and had some personnel turnovers. Oddly enough, I don't think you've met our employee here, but she next year will actually be the employee handling the fixed assets. My biggest thing is right now we're going to try to prioritize it toward the top and just try to knock it out next year. Other than it's real tight resources in the office. But we thought there was other projects more pressing, and that was my audit response because we were working on the budget and other items during the time. The only other thing is a best practice, and your best practice is a recommendation from the comptroller's office that they strongly believe that full consolidation is best practice. And it's on page number 12 of your agenda.
When you say full consolidation, do you mean between us and?
Yes, sir, just like something similar to the 81 Act, or the 12 before the school portion was removed.
Question I was, you said there was 2 findings. I only saw that one.
The second one's the best practice. I loosely, you've got the one for budget, or
That's a finding?
it is, they
Saying that we're
call
not
it
doing it?
best practice, but they have it back in the finding section, so I'm loosely calling it a finding.
Because we're not doing it?
That's their best practice recommendation. They don't have it listed, they don't have it numbered as a finding, but they have it under your sections with the findings.
Mr. Bailey came last year to the audit committee. Are y'all familiar with that? Can you tell him why Mr. Bailey said it wasn't a finding? Because if we're arguing, we're working on it. I
Well,
think it's the,
There's 2 things. The best practice is here. What you're
Yes.
saying, in other words, on the 2012 Act, there was a question last year if the county is progressing toward implementation, and his viewpoint, which I'm not going to disagree with at all, is as long as the county's making some effort, the way the act was amended in 2019, that it is moving forward. So they're not going to take exception. But you do have this is a totally different one here. This is one saying the best practice is full consolidation.
But we determined that, right?
As a county commission, yes.
So I tried to figure that out in highway. I guess y'all saw the emails going back and forth. I'm not allowed to ask that question. I can't even put it on the agenda, I guess.
Which question was it?
If we're making progress and what progress has been made over the last year since
I can speak.
since the commitment was made to have the POs brought in by this fiscal year. I was going to follow up with that, but it got left off the agenda and the meeting ended up getting canceled because of lack of quorum.
I can speak for exactly that. That's okay.
If this falls under results and best practices, otherwise it's not on the agenda.
It would technically be part of doing a consolidation that would fall to best practices, but it would.
Okay, I'm just saying we need to find something to shove it into.
But I'll give him a quick and dirty where we're at. Anytime you're doing the 12 or anything, the next move is to adopt a policy. The county commission, and you'll talk about it in 81, I can kind of go over the history, adopted the 12 Act. If you look at your purchasing policy until it's amended by that committee, it specifically says the highway department is excluded. I follow policy. So if the policy says he's included and he doesn't do POs, it puts me in a position of not paying his bills. And then ultimately, if you go that hard line, it would go to court and it would be settled through the judicial process.
Where was it that said is that the highway is excluded?
It says it on your purchasing policy. It says, and I don't have the exact verbiage in front of me, it basically says that they will be included at a later date.
Okay.
The later date is not here. It doesn't say they're excluded until a later date. It's never been changed, but I can say one thing where we have done. When and there's a longer history, when this road superintendent came in, he has, even though the policy does say he's voluntarily started all the bidding through our office. So we do all the bids for him right now, and he has agreed as soon as we are got enough available resources to start on his office that he is going to do the Kronos implementation. he has agreed to follow those and then look at the other one at a later date.
Mr. Jones, have a follow-up?
Yeah, but that's where we were last year. And the commitment was they're doing that then through this year. And then by this year budget cycle, they were going to get the purchase orders under also. That was what the statement was made. So we pushed pause for a year. So my follow-up was to see, have we made progress? Because that's all we're supposed to do. And I just wanted to ask for that.
So,
It's fair, right?
So to that, is there, I recall some discussions surrounding that. Are there meeting minutes that specifically state that we can reference?
State.
I think it came on the full commission over that $20 million fight about releasing funds because they were contingent upon him bringing his purchase
No,
order.
like I said, I recall some conversation, but it would be very helpful if there were some meeting minutes that we could reference, so it takes the emotion out of it.
Yeah, I think we'd have to go back to the commission minutes to look at that, because I wasn't highway chairman then.
But I can just, I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to add a little bit of context to that, because I recall this conversation as well, and I agree, it'd be good to have the minutes in front of us, but the issue, so Mr. Jones is correct, I think, in terms of, I'm not sure about some of the details of exactly what was agreed to for that timeline, but there were two different components that were asked to be completed. One, I guess, was the bids, and the other was the purchase orders. The reason that we deferred that was not lack of resources from the highway department. It was lack of resources from the finance team. Because we have an ongoing Kronos implementation, which, we have a stack of priorities. Broad-based Kronos implementation, also leading, all of it's designed to better consolidate. So the Kronos implementation across the county is the broader and higher priority. And our argument, and both Mr. Long and I spoke to this during that meeting, was that it was not an unwillingness on the highway department's point. It was just that we didn't have the resources.
It was both, because I remember the conversation. He said even if they implement it today, he couldn't take it on.
So that's right.
I remember that.
And so at the end of the day, we're in the,
That's why we pushed pause.
right. And so we're in a budget cycle right now. And this is just important to understand. So it's the engineering triangle, right? You have resources, time, and scope. So we have a fixed scope. We have a timeline that's extended because we have a certain number of resources. If we want this to go faster, you would need more personnel in the finance department. We are right now trying to still cut $1 million worth of cuts. And that's with adding, I think you asked for 2, and we've cut that down to 1. So I would argue, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but I would argue that given the resources that we as a commission have allocated to the finance department, we should assess the speed of our progress based on how many resources we as a commission believe that the taxpayers want to fund. Because if we want faster consolidations, then we have to put more resources toward the problem at the end of the day.
I understand.
Ms. Boyd.
You want to go first? No,
It doesn't matter, whomever wants to.
I don't care. So as far as like our priorities, then I would state that our priorities are so far off the rail that I don't even know if we can wheel them back in. Because if you look at the 81 Act, back even in 1981, if you want to put it in, but today if we look at it, it says 18 months. When the legislators wrote that out, they gave them 18 months to get it done. Here we are in 2025, looking at the 2012 Act. So if we haven't been prioritizing to now, if we still aren't, we'll never get there. They gave them 18 months, and now we are over a decade in trying to work it out.
We've got so many resources. If the commission or committee's will is for purchasing to be next, we will slow down Kronos and pull into the purchasing. What it will take is for the committee to adopt basically that they are required to do purchase orders when they require them to do that. And it was said by one of our mayors, and you were here at the time, when he said it on the commission floor, is be careful the policies you adopt, because I'm a policy follower. That's my job. So if you adopt a policy, he has to have purchase orders. He doesn't get them, we won't pay his bills, and then it'll be dealt with by the courts, or you'll have to call a meeting to get us to pay them. Because frankly, that's what our job is. Right now, there is not a policy requiring them, so it goes back into two things. What's the priority, and how hard do you want to push it?
So,
This is going to be super quick. The last one wasn't. So we do not have a great surplus of recurrent funds, but we do have a reasonable amount of funding in our capital. I would like to make a motion for the finance department after we're done, well, as soon as you can, and we can put a timeline on it, to price out what a surge cost for implementation of Kronos, consolidation of all POs across the county, what those would be if we were to put a capital project toward it. So a 1-year project, 2-year project, build a project and price it and bring it back so that let's see what we could do to actually try to do this if we could put capital toward it. That would be my motion.
Let me ask you a question. Is the highway the only department that's not okay?
Well,
Boys.
Yes.
Hold on a second.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, but, and I'm not saying we want to go down this path, but I'm saying if we can build out a price line for it, we're having this argument about we're in the middle of a kind of discussion about the 1981 versus 2012 Act. I would be interested in what like the real cost of truly bringing the schools over into the county would be, because I don't think it would be trivial.
Real quick, there is a motion on it. Is there a second?
what motions are?
I'll second for the point of discussion.
Okay. All right. So there's a motion. The motion was shook. You want to summarize?
I'll say it again. It is for the finance department to develop a roadmap and a cost estimate for complete consolidation of all financial activities into the finance department,
Including the schools.
and break it out modularly, just like a project plan.
We have that from the 81, but I'll update it.
Please update it with current
It was
prices.
developed, and we'll talk about the history of the 81, because there's a lot of history on the 12 and 81 that's missing at this discussion right here. And there's missing about the discussion on the 2002 Act. There's a whole long history involved here, and there's several issues. One, the next step would be, if we want to move forward, as you're saying, fund and adopt a policy.
We need to, I'm not saying we should do or don't, I'm just saying
We
we just need to know what the facts are.
Jim?
The 1981 versus the 2012, does it have the same stipulations on the purchase orders for all departments?
It has a lot more. It's the school, county.
Okay. So
It's receiving it.
specific, I want to make sure we weren't
It's a
working against.
complete consolidation. The only thing that you lose from the 81 to the 12 is the 12 has requirements for automated timekeeping, which I believe is very important, because you are a provider. You're basically providing business as labor in some form or another. So the Fair Labor Standards Act comes into play very heavily. We don't want to be in non-compliance. So that's why I think that piece is important. It is not addressed in the 81. Otherwise, the 81 addresses everything else.
And then did you put a timeline on your motion for the request?
Before I put the timeline on, can I just how long would that take, Mr. Long? I want to make it reasonable for you to get it done.
Let's get the budget done, and then we can get you, say in September, bring something back.
1 September. I would say 1 September is my timeline for that to come back.
So let me hop in here. So following up on Mr. Jones' question there, the school specifically, it's my understanding that there is a difference in 81 and 2012 as it pertains, but your answer just a second ago confused me about that.
The 2012 Act, POs are required by everybody in the county. We're doing everybody right now except for the highways. In the 1981 Act, it is countywide, including the schools. So the 81 consolidates every single department that's under the county trustee, which would include the school department.
So 12 basically excluded the schools.
with the 19 amendment.
I got you. What was the name?
2019 amendment was two things. It excluded the schools and gave the county a longer time period to do the implementation.
It just took out the timeline for
Pretty much.
implementation.
It says you've got as much time as you need, and the reason being was, at the time, we had different road superintendent, and she was refusing to do the POs, and nobody wanted to move forward to adopt a policy. And at the same time, the same thing we run into now, there's, most of your departments has agreed to do Chronos, but there's a few that's doesn't want to, that are basically trying to refuse. And then additionally, you have 11 personnel policies that are interlinked all over the place.
Okay, so coming back to the motion that's on the table, Mr. Hyde.
I want to caution us about the full authority of this committee. And I was disappointed when I talked to Mr. Bailey at the state about the audit committee. And he was telling me that the audit committee really was somewhat limited in authority to direct things, but could shine light on weaknesses, make recommendations, things of that sort. And I said, well, what is the use of an audit committee? And he said, well, there are a lot of good things that have been done across the state by shining light on things. So things that would direct certain people to do things, I would just say something like that might need to be a strong recommendation to financial management to take the action. And not that it doesn't need to be, I fully think it needs to be. But
That's a good point. I mean, to me, it could,
I'll amend my motion.
our motion could be to request the budget
I'll-
committee to look at it.
I'll amend my motion since we're coming up in, when's the next financial management meeting?
It'll be the third Thursday
I mean, so I'm
in
good.
May, a couple of weeks.
So, okay. Well,
You
then
want-
we got enough going on in budget. If it can come up through financial management, then I'll make the recommendation. I'll change my motion to strongly recommend that financial management take it up so that they can handle it.
Take a look at the full cost.
and
Is the second good with that?
Well, I was gonna ask, is your, I thought your motion was to the finance department, it was to the financial management committee.
Yeah, but otherwise, if he's gonna report back to audit, it's the problem. That's getting out of the scope of the function of this
Right.
committee. So to make the request of another committee that's more
Has
aligned to do
oversight.
Then
that,
to give it to financial management.
Well,
for financial management to make the ask of
Correct.
finance of
Okay,
what he
okay.
wants.
we're a spotlight. So I'm just gonna amend.
I was gonna say, if he was okay with us doing it, there doesn't seem to be a
I mean, it's
problem.
just procedural, but
He's right here at the table.
But he's gotta report back to a committee.
yeah.
And this committee may not meet for another.
It'll be
Y'all meet
faster.
once a year,
Okay.
It'll
so.
be faster over time.
Okay.
All right, so let's
I'm
roll
fine-
back.
I'm
So,
fine with
so the, okay, so the motion is to ask the financial management committee to direct or to ask the finance department to put together the
For a plan with
Halfway and
a plan and
modular pieces, et cetera. Second, any other questions? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sure, that's unanimous.
Gary, I would recommend if you have 5 or 10 minutes to call, well, it won't be that short, I guarantee you, but call Mr. Bailey so that you can get the same information that I got from him, and just tell him that I suggested that you call him.
All right, appreciate it.
The next item. The next item is item C, and it is election commission. I'm gonna start handing out some handouts and go through the importance of each one really slowly. The first one's just out of our financial statements, is just the expenditure report. I'm sorry, keep passing that one down to Kim and Jordan. I think most of you has met Jordan. She's from my office. She's a financial analyst.
Yeah, it's budget, yeah. I do.
You got one more?
I think I gave
I have one.
Okay. There you go. There should be another one.
I've got two.
Is there another one?
We'll make that.
Yeah, here's an extra.
We're good.
Okay.
Everybody good?
This is the financial report, and it is as of through today. And you really got 3 line items that's over. That's the overtime, it's the election workers, and the third one is actually the rentals to move the voting machines. The one I really want to focus on right now, if everybody's okay with it, is the actual election workers. And one, there's the benchmarking from the budget committee, and I think most of you have heard that Miss Ashley, on behalf of the election commissions, number one statement is that other counties are not comparable. So she's not in agreement with the benchmarking, but they are in here for any of you that would like to look at them.
And can I say for the record, I asked Ms. Ashley. Yes.
Ms. Boyd, go ahead. Let's just make sure we're following.
I did offer Ms. Ashley the opportunity to compare counties that we should compare to, and there are none.
That was our understanding. And I will go through the benchmark later, but the reason I'm pointing out the first page of the benchmarking is right in front of it. We actually had another little analysis I did. It's on page 13. And some of the emails I've received is the overage has been caused by the cuts of the budget committee, but the one reason I want to focus up on election workers is a couple of reasons, and I'll show you right now. Page 13. And I know it's rather small, and that's why I read it, but it's only important to one thing, and I'll tell you the important item on it. The request from the election commission was $277,219. The budget committee, after they did an analysis on the election workers, actually funded it for $280,000, which is actually more. The current amount, that it's over is $52,000 some odd dollars, because the current expenditures are $332,721. So it's actually exceeding both estimates, but the budget committee's estimate was actually higher. The thing that I have got here is a couple of other handouts, and I will go through those really slowly.
So real quick,
It's related to
her request was 277.
Yes, sir. Funded it at
What year was it that she missed the deadline and we included?
Not this past year, it was the year before.
Would that have been this number?
No, it's the one before. So this one had no effect.
Okay, so this one, okay.
She submitted her
So
budget.
she submitted 277, 219.
Yes, sir. You funded
We
280.
approved and funded 280.
Right, and it's
They've
337.
come in at 332,721.
And that's the significant line item that's in question.
Do we know why she's 60 grand above?
Well, that's my next handout. We're gonna kind of analyze that, and then Miss Ashley's actually sent me one of the reasons, and there could be other reasons. I don't have management of this department, but I can just show you the numbers, interpret, and give you a few interpretations on those. One, two.
It's the same. Yeah.
Two for Jordan. I'll keep you one pass the rest of them down, Mr. Hyde. When everybody's got this sheet, I'll go ahead and start. If you look at the very top, left to right, what I've tried to do is show a couple of things. If you look on the very left at this little box, it's going to show your fiscal year, so fiscal year 25, 21, and 17. Why those are important is 25, 21, and 17 are all presidential primary years. Okay. If you look going over from left to right, the third column over is your election day. The last one we're showing is November 5th, 2024, August 1st, 2024. I've got number of registered voters. What I did with your registered voters is I took from the first one to the second one and I averaged them. That's the average on the little gray box, the 137,699 at the top. Does everybody see that? That would be your first average. I go to the second one, that's your number of votes cast, correct? Those we don't average because votes cast are individual votes. So the 118,210 would be your number of votes cast. And then I went on over and looked at one more thing, which is your election precincts. The far right, there, the first one you look at, 332,721, 13 is the number you just heard. That's the amount they've spent on poll workers this year. The numbers following, it says percentage change. This shows you the percentage change from the last election. The number of registered voters is up 14.81. Your cast votes down in total 0.72. And if you take a difference between 28 and 29 precincts, that's a 3.57% increase. But your actual cost is up 32%. If you do look at things.
Can I ask a question real quick? Yes, sir.
Mr. Shep.
So I want to be understand that one, it's interesting. We actually have fewer votes cast in 2025 versus 2021. That's interesting. Even though we had in that same period of time almost 15% growth in population. Is that a true statement? So next thing, which is
I think it's 15. I'd have to verify the growth, but it's off the benchmarking.
14.81.
Is that off my benchmarking?
Yes, that's what it said. Registered voters. 14.8.
Oh, you're talking about the number of registered
voters.
I actually have the actual
Sorry.
population.
Let me be more specific. Registered voters.
And let's be clear, that is the average number of registered voters between the two elections.
I got it. I get it.
That's correct.
So that's interesting in and of itself. But what's more interesting to me is that, so in spite of, so we had a flat number of voters, or we had fewer, relatively a little bit fewer number of votes cast, one more precinct, but a 32% more spend.
But I want to point out a couple of things, and this is what we've got to look at too, just to be fair, is if you look at, say, the top one, which is the presidential, it is about 6% more than the presidential, so your primary is less, so I don't know how that caused the distributions. The other thing is I actually questioned Mr. Ashley, and I've got some handouts here, the same thing about possible causes, and really didn't get much of a good response on it, but there's this one. And then there's a second email here, and I'll go over both of them together because they are important, and because I'm looking at a couple of possible reasons and a couple of things I'm removing a couple of reasons. And I'll hand you this one down too. Just a second for everybody. Okay, the first one and the second one. The first one has a date that says 2024 fees on the second little part right here at the top. And the reason that's important is I asked one thing.
Which one, I'm sorry?
It has, if you look up here at the very top, it says, where it says attachment, it says 2024 fees.
Jessica Allison.
Jessica, okay.
Yeah, instead of me, that's another marker on too. If you look there and you look at the third page, what's important is I actually asked them to send me the fees from 2024, 22, 2020, and 2018. Because when you look at the handout that I passed out to you guys earlier, what it says on the state website is poll workers are compensated for working polls, and it goes in, it says it's basically determined by the local election commission determines how much poll workers make. That's why I pulled this, and by looking at it, I don't see any significant change in the poll workers' price, but on the other email from Miss Ashley, the one that's got my name on the top, as their chairman pointed out, Miss Ashley did point out that the newer machines are significantly heavier, so she had to actually use more workers to carry them, is one of her reasonings for the increase in cost. The other ones I didn't ask her because we did ask her if she's coming to the committee, and she informed me that her attorney advised her that it was outside the scope of this committee and not to appear. But just to be fair, because I'm not the manager of this department and I'm only looking at sheer numbers, there could be other reasons for these changes. And I can think of some examples in my head, but they may or may not be true. Back in 2021, they could have determined that the lines were too long, or that they wanted more in early voting, or other things. There could be other factors. Could be more programming on the new machines or more work. I'm not really sure. She's already alluded here, or actually stated, that there was additional cost due to the weight of the machines are 50 plus pounds compared to the old ones.
But was that where one person could have done it, now it takes two?
She's saying that was moving them. So you wouldn't have to have necessarily to say one person was moving machines, now two people are moving them. So that would be, if that's true, that would be some additional cost. Now, if you look, interestingly enough, if you look at these percentage changes on this sheet again, your top one's a 32.2% increase, right under the 333,000. Everybody see that? The other one was, 252. This last time was a 32% increase. The time before was a 34% increase, but the time before was actually almost a 38, going on 39%, closer to 39% increase of actually votes cast. So, as I'm saying, these numbers show you, what they show you is the percentage increase in the cost of the poll workers, which is your largest override, versus the increases in the elections. However, without Miss Ashley here, I cannot myself tell you if there's some other factor playing in there than what she's eating.
Right.
This increase of workers, was this calculated at budget time, or did we ask for something at the time budget was being formulated and then just decide in the middle of the year to increase salaries?
Well, she didn't increase the amount of her poll workers. What she's saying is what I'm reading on her email, unless I misunderstand, where she's, at one time, it's taken additional workers to move the machines because they're heavy. That's what she's saying. But to be fair to the whole thing, the budget committee came in with a larger number than Miss Ashley had, but they're both significantly off. There was the budget committee's estimate based on, compared to Miss Ashley, was very close, within $3,000, but we're both materially off. So it brings me back to the real question, and I've got the statute here of what we went through all this, but here is the real question that you're asking.
I want to dig into this. I want to make sure I understand.
Yes, sir.
So it didn't result in additional workers.
I'm not sure
And it didn't result in additional pay.
That's what I'm saying. The pay is not they didn't increase pay. In other words, the amount of the pay, but I'm not sure, based on what Miss Ashley's telling me here on this email, is it's taking additional workers because when they move the machines, they got to be moved in more workers there. That's what she's saying has caused a lot of that uptick. And I don't know, there may be other reasons. It would be a very good question for Miss Ashley, because I'm not sure and I can't recall, I was only at one precinct where I voted, or at early voting. I think I actually heard of voted. But I'm not sure what your lines looked like in 21 versus 24. I'm not really, I really
can't remember, because 21 was like, we were dealing with COVID, right? It was August and November of 2020. Yeah.
Was there a big line and they try to compensate? I don't know. It's something they really need to talk to you guys about. I didn't get an answer back, because the answer I received, because we invited them or asked them if they were coming to tonight's committee, and she advised me that they had a closed session. It's in the email here, and that her attorney had advised her that it was beyond the scope of the committee and not the council.
I've got a question about that, but I'll come back. Mr. Jones, we'll go with you. I'll go with you.
So I remember the 2020 election, the primary, is that what we're talking about? That was probably the most contentious primary we've had in decades, because that was the 16 members running against, each other for the Republicans. So that was as big a turnout as any. So if we're not seeing a significant change.
You're talking about the August or November 3010?
August.
The
primary
we're talking about
for the presidential. So that should have been higher than anything if that's what you're going to look at comparisons wise. But if it was in the range.
I'm just giving you possibilities because I don't manage the department. All I'm doing is showing you sheer numbers to sheer numbers.
You've got the numbers of the turnouts is what I'm saying. But also what I wanted to question was, you got the numbers of the employees and their salaries or what they're paid, each time, but yet you're saying that didn't increase either one, the quantity or the dollar amount?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying she sent me the schedule, and the cost we're paying per election worker appears to be materially the same, based on, without asking. She's saying they had to carry 2 machines, so they needed more workers, so that's what kicked your cost up.
But is there an increased number of workers? Are you seeing that?
Yes, there's more of poll workers on these total days and more days. Your poll workers get paid by days. So there's more days to make the $52,000 extra dollars. So there's more poll workers there.
Okay, so these are machines that have wheels on them that can be rolled around.
She's telling me
more people to
and you've got to think
carry
about it. They have hard times getting volunteer poll workers. So a lot of your poll workers are elderly or people that are retired. So it would make sense if they weighed 50 plus pounds. Some of those probably could not move those machines. I'm not trying to be shy, but it does make sense.
We don't know any of this, Mr. Show.
So I just want to, this is why benchmarking is important. because we can look at these, I have this question, I'm the one who posed the question. You have this big increase while the total number of votes cast stay flat. That throws a bit of a flag. However, I'm surprised that Ms. Ashley did not latch on to this benchmarking as more than she did, because it actually, in many cases, helps her case. And I'm going to give an example. To me, just looking at the numbers of, if you look at page 15, if you look at page 14 and 15, 15 and 16 on the main package, it's clear to me that at least in terms of broad-based spending behavior patterns, the outlier is not Sumner, the outlier is Wilson. And whatever effects that are causing increases from 2021 to 2025, we don't have that one on here, but 2021, 2023, we can look at that. They're the same because the behavior spikes, the patterns look very, very, very similar. So that, I think there's probably some inflation baked into that. I think there are some patterns, there are some things here that what this benchmarking tells me is that, without getting into the details, which we're, which is going to be beyond our wheelhouse, we're going to be talking about 50 pounds versus 60 pounds. What I'm saying is that if I look at these, a lot of the things that are going up and down, we can argue that we're spending too much, but the increases and decreases appear to be similar across 3 of these 4 counties. So I don't know that that 33%, 32%, it has to be considered in context of how all of these other counties are behaving. So I think we're right to question it, but I don't know that it is, I see it as I see it as a yellow flag, not necessarily a red flag, because it looks to me like the other counties are behaving similarly. Now, one more note. If you go to page 15, look at the original budgets, and I recall this because I was part of it. You will see a considerable decrease from 2021 to 2023, and we look different than the other counties here. And there was a reason for that. We basically put a pretty heavy squeeze on the election commission for the last 2 years. 22-23.
Well, 21
So-
to 23, because it went down from 20.
Well, the real drop is 22 to 23. And so my point here is that we have, to some degree, constrained the spending already. There's one graph that I didn't explicitly ask for that I think would illuminate all of this, and I'm not going to ask you to do it, and that would be a year-over-year graph like this of spend per capita, spend per votes cast, because all we have here are the gross. Do we have that one?
Yes, I
No, you have that, but you don't have a year-over-year graph of it. So, but it's okay. I'm just saying that I want to summarize this up by saying, 1, 32% change when your numbers are flat. We're right to look at that. But whatever's happening here appears to be happening in the other counties as well. 2, we need to consider that we have, the budget committee has made some changes to how constrain the finances of the election commission are. 3rd point, this committee was tasked with 2 things from budget. One was to look at performance, and that's what we're doing, I think. I would argue that looking at these numbers juxtaposed against the benchmarking, her performance is, I don't see that. I mean, it may be on the high side, but it is not outside of bounds. I think our time would be better spent understanding why there are these constant requests for additional funds throughout the year, and we can't seem to get a good handle on when and how the spending is done through the year. Because that's what, just from my position on budget, that's what's vexing me a lot more than how she's actually performing. That's my opinion.
one, like apples to apples, all their machines weigh the same. And I think they weigh 43 pounds and not 50. But I can check on that.
I'm just going about the email.
I know. I'm just saying. But it seems to me like when we pack the machines in, it's before we open the poll. So all my workers are in there. That's the table workers and the machine operators and everybody. I got a lot of people to pack around those 7 or 15, 10, whatever machines it is. I got plenty of personnel. So I think I got people to carry them around. There's the breeder. He can help. That's there. So the weight and the double packing, I'm not sure. Apples to apples, they all have this, all of these people, all of these are using microvote, so they're all the same. Yeah, we did put some squeeze on them. I'm not sure that we're not finished squeezing because they're still out there doing, expanding. We gave them everything they wanted and everything they calculated, and they still came back that way. The one item we haven't discussed on here, and I don't know if you want, if I can interject it now or if we're going to get back to it, is the early voting that we brought up in budget. How many days of early voting we're doing? Is now a time that we can interject that, or do you have that?
Oh, I'm going to pass this out when we get finished.
Something else
Yeah.
similar to what you.
You're gonna, I can look at anything that you need me to right now, but I was
You're
going to
already
pass that
voting your
over.
last, because I want to talk about that
You want to talk about
a
it?
little bit, but do you have any other points right now? If not, I'll go to Mr. Hyde.
The only thing I was going to say that the stations, it doesn't make sense to me that because we have more voters, I think we should rule that out automatically. It doesn't quite make sense because at my polling place, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have 4 machines. It could be 5, but I think it's 4. And we don't have any extra machines. We didn't buy a surplus of machines. You're going to have the same number of machines regardless of how many voters you have. So keep that in mind. And then the second thing is the weight of the machines. That, my personal opinion, that's one of the most ridiculous arguments that I think anyone could make because I walk around, I'll be 80 Friday, and I walk around with 45-pound plates in my hand all day long. It just doesn't make sense that you have an older person or even, I mean, I've seen who works at the polls and they're capable of rolling in, like Tim says, if they have wheels, of rolling in 4 machines like at Hawkins to vote. None of this to me, yeah, and there may be something else. I want to know more. But I think that we have been handicapped as an audit committee, which is a state statute, to gather information and shine a spotlight. We have been somewhat limited by a non-cooperation with us. But so be it.
Mr. Jones.
So I'll concede a lot of what Commissioner Schoaf said, but I did want to highlight one thing. It was a significant drop from 2021 of 1.22, then it drops to 1.19, then it drops again to 1.0, it looks like. Then it comes up slightly to 1.05, but then bam, we're right back again in 2025 to 1.3. We came way back up and she still went over. That was last year's budget, right? So it's projected out.
No, it's this year.
Fiscal year we're in right now, right?
We haven't discussed the benchmarks. We did discuss them in budget, but let me go over those really quickly.
That is a presidential year, so it would come back up.
Because Tim was not at budget, so he's not seen these benchmarkings before. A couple of things, Tim. If you go, and I'll go through them really quickly, because on page 14, you got that. Page 14, and you've got the little blue box there, and it's very important. And above it, it tells what they're doing at first. The first one is cost per capita, which if you read that, cost per capita is your original 2025 budget divided by your total population. So if you just took their total cost and divided by the total everybody in the county, That's how much it costs everybody in the county just to do it that way. Because I looked at it 3 ways to see what was, I'm sorry, I saw that from Mr. Baker. It's in your original package on page 14.
I thought it was a handout.
Are you calling him slow?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I'm just kidding.
I can go real slow if you need me to. You guys kind of go.
He always
fast or
does
slow?
go fast, but go ahead.
Okay.
I was looking up for the, where you were, so okay.
Did you find it, Mr. Baker?
Yes.
If you look at the first column, and I think all of you were at the meeting except for Tim, he wasn't in budget. So this is kind of redundant, but the first column,
Mr.
page.
Hyde wants to put that.
Mr. Hyde up there. Sorry, Mr. Hyde. Page 14, if you look at the blue box, and the very second column from the list is cost per capita. That's just the total cost of your election commission in 2025 divided by every single estimated citizen in your county. So that's what it comes up with. And Sumner County on that one did drop out a little higher than Wilson, but not significantly, but higher than the rest of them. Then cost per registered voters. If you just take their total population, okay, and then you take the average number of registered voters for that period, that's how we come up with the cost per registered voter. Because it's an average, it goes up and down on your elections. So you wouldn't want to count those twice because they're not too, because some of those are the same registered voters. They come in and out. And then the last one, we take the cost, all the votes cast in the county that year, and you take their total expense and drop it by votes cast. That was our first benchmark. And if you look, we used Wilson, Sumner, and Rutherford, and we originally had Williamson, but the problem we went into Williamson County takes the expenses for their benefits on all their employees, which is a significant number, and they put them in the bottom of their budget, mix them with everybody else's benefits, so we have no way to determine what their benefits are. Which, could be 20, 30% of your budget. So we were originally wanting to put Williamson in, but it was really skewed because it didn't include all those costs. That's what you're looking at on page 14. And then you come back on to page 15. At the top, we just gave you the raw data for the most recent elections. That's all 4 counties for the November and August, just to kind of show you the overall turnout. And because that's really hard to look at, we went back and came in down below it and we graphed it. What it does show you, same thing that our chairman pointed out a minute ago, our election commission was the most expensive in 22 based on the original budget, but they aren't anymore. But they're still, I think they're number 2 at this point. And then you go on to below that, and it just gives you the data on the original budgets. We went on to the next page, and one of the important markers that we're always asked is how many full-time employees does each office have, so we use that. So Wilson County has 4, Sumner 8, Rutherford 9, and Montgomery 5. So Sumner's got the second largest number of full-time employees. I thought that was important. It's always asked. And then your next graph falling right below that, it goes only to 2024, and it shows your actual numbers on page 15, followed by the actual numbers under the graph. What it shows in 22, you actually were the most expensive, but that's changed. The reason we showed the budget and the actuals, because right now we're looking at the 25 budget, is the full discussion, but we wanted to see if the same patterns held true with budget and actual to these counties.
So I did review all this, and I understand all the things that you said, but my point of the matter was everybody's, all the different counties go up and down as the elections cycle through presidential years and stuff. So well, except for the outlier there, but what Commissioner Shope was pointing out was the fact that we have constricted them, somewhat, but everybody's kind of trends down in an off-cycle year after an election. And we have ramped back up just like everybody else did, and considerable amount in 2025, which is the cycle we're in right now, right?
Right. One thing we don't know is that any of them have to amend their budget. What their actuals are, we don't know those right now. We do know that they're over, that our election commission's over the budget, but to
Like
give you all the
$55,000, right?
52 in the election workers.
Okay, 52.
But we don't know where the other election offices currently are at. We could call and try to obtain that data.
So that's 18%.
Just on election workers, if we got overall, it's hard. The year's not over, but one thing's pretty much over is the election. So the election workers.
But how we got here, from what I remember from hearing the budget talks, was we set a budget, and then she's spending over that amount, and then just coming and asking for a check. And we're never asking her to stay within her budget. Like, a director should keep it within the budget and find creative ways to do that, and not just spend it on out.
And this is a continual problem, am I right?
You are correct, because the two things, if you look at, they're talking 8112 general. If you look at the 81 Act, it talks about the appropriation resolution. You do that by department such as election. She's not over on her total budget, but your actual appropriation resolution that it's referencing it to, it does say the limit is by line item. Also, if you look at the 2012 Act, your 2012 Act says it's a limit per line item. But if you look at this really quickly, I think I can answer Tim's question. Did you go?
That's more to say. I don't want to
Go
change the
ahead.
subject.
If you take these two items right here, I passed them out to you, and there's two things to look at. The first one says it's TCA 2-12-109, the one we just passed out a minute ago. And oddly enough, these numbers are similar. One's 2-12-209. We're looking at 2-12-109 first. And I highlighted on mine the very first paragraph, and it's very important. And I'll give everybody a second to read through it, and I'll point out the three important items that I see. If you look at that, there's three things on that. If you look through there, it says what is reasonably necessary for the discharge of statutorily mandated duties. So what you're trying to really determine is, was the amount budgeted sufficient, or is the expenses more than what's reasonably necessary for the discharge of statutorily mandated duties.
With all due respect, you'll never be able to answer this question unless you overlay the duties of the election administrator on top of this to see if she's doing her part also. Because a manager has to deal with things like, if you're paying somebody $100 a day and they're too old to pick up a box, or they're too weak to pick up a box, or to pick up half of a box, 21 pounds, because the other half's on wheels, then she should do the calculation and see, should I pay 125, and maybe I can get a younger person in here to do it. That's the type of math that she needs to be doing to manage the amount of budget we gave her. Is she doing that? So I don't know how to answer that without looking at the duties of the election administrator.
That's my point. All I can answer for you is the numbers. I can't answer for you on the manager portions.
All right, let's make sure we got, I think.
I'm good.
All right,
So,
Joe.
I'll try to quick one. The whole point of in my view, the whole point of the benchmarking is to answer that without having to do all these duties. And I think it is very clear that, like, the benchmarking shows a couple things. One, I think it's very clear that, and look, I'm not a lawyer, but I would take these numbers any day of the week and go to a court and say, hey, we're of these local counties that appear to largely behave the same on a per capita and per vote cast basis. We're the most expensive, and we're not crazy more expensive, but we're the most expensive. If that's not reasonably necessary, then there is no check that the commission can make on the election commission, and it is this law means nothing. So I'd argue that any day of the week. I think that is very easy to answer. The real question is, now the flip side of that is, we're shining a spotlight, but the flip side of it is, I also don't see anything in these behavior patterns that are wildly out of whack. While it is clear that these are reasonably necessary, I don't see anything in terms of at least getting the start of a performance audit, which just is not that, but it is the beginning of that kind of look. That the election commission is not wildly out of, they're not unreasonably asking for things, you're just on the high end of it. So the real question in my mind is, well, because I agree with what Commissioner Jones said regarding and it was one of the things we came here to try to figure out, why is the election commission continually operationally going under budget? That is absolutely happening. We can answer the question that we're within what's reasonably necessary. So why is this still happening? I don't think we can answer that. I'm more interested in terms of recommendations that we can go up. What controls would the commission have? What levers do we have in order to enforce the election commission's activities, assuming that we are within that reasonably necessary bound? That's the question that I think is the crux of the matter.
I have not been asked that question, so I don't have an answer for you.
I can answer it pretty well. But there was a discussion that was several months back about if they ran over and it was salary related, the budget committee, and there were several years there that said, go ahead and pay if it's salary, which would be the election workers, and we'll have to clear that up later. That's kind of what they're running on. The big thing is if it wasn't an individual salary or another item, I just refuse to pay it. So you're really kind of in that issue. There's amounts due to election workers. Are they, we pay them an amount per day, but are they considered an employee type? What leverage do we have not to pay an employee? So it may be more, most stuff I just refuse to pay, but that's one you may need to get the courts involved in if you want to go that direction.
Mr. Hyde.
We've heard many things said here tonight that we throw our hands up and say, we have questions, we don't know the answers, we can't get answers. So I want to make a motion, and it may go nowhere, but I think we should have another meeting with an invitation to the controller's office for a representative of the controller's office to be with us, since this is a state statute committee, and a representative from the Secretary of State to be with us to hear our problems and the fact that we from that office cannot get answers to make decent decisions financially about the election commission.
There's a motion and a second. Which repeat those two?
That we invite the controller of the Treasury, a representative from the controller of the Treasury, invite him or a representative, and the Secretary of State or a representative to meet with us at the same time to hear the problems we have and the fact that we can get no answers in which to make good decisions in this county about it.
Is there a specific time period you would like to have that meeting?
I think it should be relatively soon.
There's a second, so Mr. Jones second, and then Mr. Schultz.
Who would be the person making the request? I mean, just from the motion maker, who's the person?
The law director. It'd be best, I think, coming from somebody in the legal department.
Maybe about a month from now, next month this time. First Wednesday.
I'd say within 6 weeks in my motion, if you'll second that.
Well, the reason why I'm saying back it up a little bit is because we're getting right into summer vacations and stuff like that. But if you do this time next month, you may catch people before they go out. You think this month is long enough for them to have notice to come?
I say we leave it open to see what their schedules are.
Just request within a month, but not make them hold them to it. So we're not setting a meeting yet.
Just leave that to the attorney to
Mr. Chairman, do you
coordinate.
plan on setting a meeting yet after this meeting, or is it?
We can circle back around and see what makes sense at the end when we get closer to completion today.
Because I was gonna say you could put it against that, but if you're not ready to put a date on a meeting yet, then we could revisit the meeting time after we hear back from him.
Yeah, let's have the motion not give a specific timing, but then as we close the meeting today, let's see if it makes sense, if there's a more defined date on the motion.
No, finish this.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show that's unanimous. One of the things I asked, let me jump in the queue real quick. Or was it on that same topic?
No, it was a county question.
Going back to this handout, where it's the presidential years, I'm definitely not an expert, obviously, on the election commission side of things, but if I was looking at this and I was planning for fiscal year 25, I would have assumed that there would have been a growth in the total votes cast, right? I mean, so I would have prepared my poll workers accordingly, which is, the budgeted was 277 related to that.
Mhm.
Do you know, does that fall in line? My logic there, was that 277?
Budget committee on the fly did a projection
Okay,
and came out with around 280. That's where the number came from. And that's where your 280 on the other sheet that I showed you. So their projection was pretty much in line with hers. But to be fair with the numbers, one of the reason it's overall down is the primary was down, but the actual presidential election was the bigger of the two.
yeah, yes, it was.
So it does skew that. So you got to think, if you were planning for a normal primary, you may have put more election workers there not knowing. And then when the presidential comes in, it takes more, so the two drove it up. Plus maybe other factors. That's why I'm saying and this my thought, the argument from the election commission was their attorney advised them not to go to this committee because it wasn't really involved day to day. But the question you guys are asking are directly related to budget overages. So it may be, and we've got the budget chair here, more appropriate for the budget committee to invite her back to explain the stuff I handed out tonight. She's already talked about the benchmarking, but not the change in election workers.
I want to ask a question about that. You mentioned a few times already about, I guess, her legal counsel advised her not to show up tonight. Like, where is it, do we have visibility of what makes up that 332? My question is, second part of that is, where is the cost that she's paying the legal counsel? Where is that?
Two things that number one is, yes, we have those calls. They send it to my office. We pay those folks. We have a list of their names based on the IRS, all they do or don't get a W-2. So yes, we do have that. Number two is, I'm not sure why she's got legal counsel. I've not been paying anything toward it. Just like the suit, I had a question about paying her attorney for the suit against the county, and my response was, my understanding is we don't pay that unless we are ordered to by the courts. My other one is, I don't know of what statute's providing her to have regular legal counsel outside the county. So mine right now, if I receive the bill, I'm going to have some statutory authorization to pay that.
So it's on this email. So
yes.
So Tom Lee, as far as we know, is working for free, pro bono, on all this.
Yes. Well, I'm assuming. And then also he was at the budget hearing.
He was.
And been in a couple others. I'm not sure, since there's no suit involving this against the county, why would we pay him?
All right, Mr. Shope had his hand up. Okay.
I just want to follow up with what you just said. Is there statute of limitations on throwing a bill on that after the
Mine
fact?
is, there's a couple of things. You've got to have a statute authorizing expenditure. There's a specific statute. And then there's an AG opinion that anything necessary to operate your office. For this particular one, I need a specific statute authorizing them for this. When I went and looked at the private act that we are following for legal here, it says that it has to be a specific, basically, suit. It's my understanding.
And you have to be the prevailing party.
So the statute of limitations isn't really the point. The point is, are we authorized to pay that, or required to? I don't think we are.
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying? It's only a statute.
I was just asking if a bill shows up in 6 months or a year from now.
If it was a valid
Can
bill,
that happen?
if it was valid, but the same question comes about, should there have been a request for appropriation?
Let's reel that back in. So I got us offline there, but I'll reel it back in, Mr. Shope.
I think Ms. Boyd may have had one more thing, and I don't want to cut her off, but I feel like we've maybe, I would argue maybe that we are coming to conclusion on item C here, that we've done a pretty, item C being the discussion of the election commission for now. I think we have taken this conversation as far as we can until we go forward with that,
With our guests.
our next motion with the guests, who can better answer my question of what controls do we actually have in place. I think we could keep kicking this horse, but I don't know that we're going to get a lot further.
I've got a motion, maybe, but I'm not looking forward to.
So I wanted to speak to one of the items that came up in budget when we were discussing the amount of days that were open for early voting. As you recall, that came up in budget, and we discussed that, the amount of early voting days we have. So I went and looked. I took a look. So what I did is I found on our site, on Sumner County election site, you can look their days. And so then, I'll pass this around. I put it on here. What you'll see is I use Sumner County and Montgomery County. Montgomery's slightly larger than us. So you can see I put in the March, the August, and the November. And what you'll see is we had, in March, 28 days in total of early voting. In August, we had 28 days, and in the presidential for the November early voting, we had 31 days open. And I could only find Montgomery's for the November early voting, and they had 24 days in total. Okay.
So like a day, if
And
Hendersonville's
here's
open and
Montgomery.
Galveston's open on the same day, that's
To pass
2
those
days
around.
in this calculation. But the state law is a minimum of 15 days in that.
Day locations.
Yeah, day locations. You could have 15 locations open on one single day, that's 15 days. Or you have one location open for 15 days, that's 15 days. So, but that's by state law, the minimum of 15 days. I don't know how she calculates, getting up to the 31. I don't know
Yeah.
what that formula looks like.
Here's how I pulled her days, because I didn't know, so I pulled them off her side.
Since we have the budget chairman here, Mr. Schoaf, is there a possibility, because right now their argument was this committee doesn't do day-to-day operation, but the real question is you have a budget overage of $52,000. I've brought you the numbers of the election workers, the amount they're paid, and her explanation in the email. It may be a prudent action at this point, because we've already sent out the agenda for this next meeting, we're going to tomorrow, to go ahead, possibly request that Miss Ashley come in and explain the $52,000 specifically.
I think we should just do that. If
Okay.
we need a motion up
I would,
We can
I
add
would
it to the
like,
agenda.
I want to make that a motion,
Second.
but I want to see what Mr. Jones, is that a different topic?
It was just on the days. What's her justification for doing more than 15?
I
definitely not a
think the
requirement.
budget committee can ask for those questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a
As long as
motion,
it gets that.
sort of like, similar to what we did a few minutes ago about the financial management ask. This motion is to request the budget committee to work with Ms. Ashley to figure out, answer the questions that we've talked about on the overages and the early election days and all that stuff. That's my motion.
I think to help
Hold on a
him,
second. There is a second. Okay, Ms. Moore.
in your package, the benchmarking the other day, you had the percentage of voter turnout. I'm not finding it in here. Remember, I think,
It's in the main
Commissioner Schoaf
benchmarking. It's in
was
there.
talking about that we had better turnout than some of the other counties that,
They're in there.
because
It's right here, page 15, I think.
I think that's what you're looking for. What I did is because we have so much data. We have
Just real quick, there is a
Regional
motion on the
benchmarking
table,
short.
so that seems to be a little off topic. So the motion is for this committee to make the request, the budget committee, to work with Ms. Ashley to understand her overages, understand how she calculates how many early voting days needed, et cetera, and whatever other questions they might have about overages.
Is it best to leave it vague like that, or to have a more pointed question like justify the amount of days that you have open for early voting?
I think my motion is sort of leave it vague for right now.
And I'm fine with that.
Okay, as long as it'll get to the heart of it, I want to understand why she chooses that, because we've all been to early voting, and there's one person trickling in every 10 to 15 minutes.
I've always contended that 1 week at Hendersonville is plenty. 1 week at Gallatin is plenty. And you could have 1 week, you have the poll workers working Interscope 1 week, and then the next week they're working at Gallatin, and then you could do your satellite, locations, different days, whatever scattered. If there needs to be a little overlap on those, that's fine, but it's plenty of time. It's plenty of time for voters but anyway, but that is the motion. Any other questions on the motion?
No question. Well, yes, this is on that motion, and I appreciated your comment, and as I remembered it during budget, I wasn't sure how I felt about it until this great work by Ms. Boyd. And because now you see, because that we really are over, the question in my mind was what's the state kind of forcing on us? It is clear now that we're like well beyond not just what the state is asking, but also what the norms are in the area. So I'm good with the second. Let's do it.
I want to just add a little bit of that. Some counties do provide a lot more. Montgomery is close to us in population. If we look at Wilson County, they're smaller in population, and they are providing extensively more early voting. So I just want to give you a caveat that there are more out there. And full disclosure.
Montgomery has a lower turnout than Sumner's one of the things.
Well,
They do a lot of absentee.
I may be
About the need,
I don't know.
it's all about the need. That isn't needed.
So Montgomery might not be the best to.
Well, their turnout is so much lower, and I think it's because of absentee.
We need to get this
let's
motion on.
let's vote on this. Any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Show that's unanimous.
I'm going to make a motion that we close this out and move on to the next item.
No motion.
Okay, awesome.
All right, item D, discussion of the 1981 financial. What do you have for us?
Included in the agenda is the Federal Financial Management Act of 1981. I was asked to include it onto the agenda. I can give you the history, and Mr. Hyde's been here much longer than me. So this act was adopted, I believe, originally back in the 1990s. Subsequently, the county adopted the 2002 Financial Management Act. It was not implemented. I came in 2009, and I think it didn't have any purchase orders, so I set up a purchase order system. At the time, the 2002 Act did not include the highway or the Chronos, so it was completely implemented. In 2010, we adopted the 1981 Act, but there was never as we're saying, there was an implementation plan created, but it was never adopted. So when the plan wasn't adopted, the 2012 Act was adopted as an alternative full consolidation. And then subsequently, in 2019, the schools decided they did not want to participate and had it changed to the 2019.
One motion discussion.
Go ahead. No, we don't need a motion discussion. Not on my committee. So go ahead.
So I think this is probably a question for the law director. I understand that we have dueling opinions right now regarding what acts are in place.
Who's the dueling opinion?
We've had an opinion from the comptroller, and then we had an opinion from a member of comptroller, and then one from CTAS, if I remember correctly.
I did not see anything that contradicted anything in my opinion. They merely restated the same thing I did, which is the county's operated with good intent. However, this is now an issue that's been brought up and needs to be addressed because there's certain legal parameters.
So
the letter, the way I read the response letter to my opinion was that we're going to continue on as a county with the good intent part.
So I guess that leads me to my second question here. What is, in your opinion, or in the opinion of, what is the law director's opinion of the structure by private act that we should be operating under? And two, what is our compliance level toward that? And then 3, what do we need to do in order to either comply with it? Like, what are our options to either get into compliance, either through amending those acts or through making? I just want to know what we're supposed to do here.
Just want to make sure I'm on the same page. The email I saw from Mr. Mumpauer did not say we needed to do something different. It does not say anything in the email that
I don't
maybe there's been other.
I don't
emails, but-
dispute that statement,
Yeah,
but
Okay.
it didn't
but it
contradict my
doesn't.
analysis.
That's different than what you're describing, I guess. In my opinion, there's a stark difference in what you're describing. But
I guess so. This maybe the question is, do we need to do anything? Do we need to change anything? Are we in any kind of danger if we were to continue operating the way we're operating now next year? Are we in any kind of danger of a finding or any kind of? I just want to know: do we need to do anything? And if we do need to do anything, what are our options?
If I,
So we've struggled with this in financial management. Did you want?
Go ahead.
So what we've done to move it forward is that on our next full commission, we're gonna vote. So we unanimously push forward a motion for the commission to decide to revoke the 81 if we want to. And that was the determination of the full financial management committee.
So just to make sure I understand, so there's going to be a motion. There's going to be a vote on the floor to revoke the 81 Act in entirety, and that requires 16 votes, correct? And so I guess my question here is, I don't think they're going to get 16 votes. My question here is, what happens if we don't? That's my question. And if nothing happens, then like, what difference does it make? It's probably a less question for our law director. I just really want to understand, like, what are the real implications of this?
Mr. Hyde.
I think really that if we vote to not repeal the 1981 Act, it's a clear signal. It would be to me that it is we don't have the will to step out of it. That this is what we want to stay with. It's got to be a 2/3, a majority, vast majority of those of us there. And if we don't get that, we stay where we are. And I remember, we're just really missing the boat by not fully implementing the Financial Management Act, in my opinion. Because when we were looking at this, pardon?
Of 81 or 12?
81, I think, because when we were looking at this early on, we took a trip, some of us, to Madison County, which is Jackson, Tennessee, a good size area. And their budget operation, as they explained it to us, just very, very smooth, because everyone, schools, highway, county general, everyone was involved in it, and they could put their budget together so easily and so smoothly. And it'd be interesting to see if they'd tell us the same thing today. But in any event, I think, in my opinion, if we don't have 2/3 vote, we're back at 1981.
That's what I wanted to know is, would that mean we start implementing 1981 at that point? If it fails, we're recognizing we're still under it because we didn't repeal it. So what I read from Mr. Mumpowers was that it was assumptions. They thought the actions taken by the previous commissions were indicating that we were doing this. But as everybody knows, one commission can't tie another commission's hands. And since it wasn't repealed, we are still running parallel with 81 and 12. So he's making assumptions of that, but he's not really saying where it lies. So would we in fact start that night being recognized as being under 81?
I'll entertain it all, but I mean, it's up to the chairman. Y'all keep asking questions. I don't know if you want me to chime in as you ask them or what.
Yeah, sorry.
I'd like to go back just a little bit. First, I don't have any interest in which act you all use. This all started because I was trying to sell a piece of property for the county, and it just spun out of control as soon as I came across the 81 Act. And truth be told, if I follow the history through the minutes and the resolutions, the 81 Act was actually this county got a majority, 2/3 majority to get out of the 81 Act around 2002. In 2010, this county voted to bring it back in. So it's not like the county can say, well, we're not very clear on whether we're under the 81 or not when you voted to bring it back after rescinding it. So that's where the trouble starts, because the 81 Act is statutorily guided that there's only one way to revoke that thing by statute, and that's the 2/3 majority vote. Then you start reading in on the 2012 Act, and it's got some issues as far as implementation, and if everybody wants to rely on CTAS, that's fine, but if you'll notice in CTAS's spin of the 2012 Act, it says that until the act is fully implemented and this full implementation is adopted by resolution, these other acts are still in play, not even taking into account a public act that has a statutory provision to get rid of it. That just gets you around all the other private acts that we were under. So we've got a private act versus public act controversy going on here. So at the end of the day, what this boils down to me is somebody needs to pick one that they like and fully implement it and then move on.
But that verifies that we are not in anything else except for the 81 until something else is fully implemented.
Here would be my argument to that. And again, attorney opinions, you talk to a different attorney, you get a different opinion. But if I want to be flexible on this for you, what my argument would be is that we're under the 81 Act and the 2012 Act is in play from a policy perspective where it reins in or addresses issues that aren't addressed by the 81 Act. Okay? Yes. If you want to get aggressive about that, the argument would be, look, you're under the 81. You've got to comply with it till you get full implementation of the 2012. Period.
We still have to repeal it because state statute says we have to. That's what
Well, no, it actually doesn't say you have to.
Who read
So
this?
we can.
You can have the two.
Yeah, we can keep going as is. And if we don't repeal, like, we would have to repeal the 2012, so maybe that comes to the board. We repeal 81, it doesn't get repealed. Repeal 12, it doesn't get repealed. Then we're back to where we are.
Exactly.
And so that, really, it doesn't change anything at the end of the day, unless one of the two gets repealed. Mr. Show?
So again, I'm gonna get back to simple. This is a wonderful conversation about the intricacies of the 1981 and 2012 Act, which I'm more familiar with now than I wish I'd ever become. But let's assume that neither get repealed because it's a high bar to repeal. Okay, we have to. I'll accept the argument that we're under both, and that we should all be consolidated. All right. One, I think that it probably makes, I would like to have, I'll probably move to push that vote off from the county floor until we, have a cost for what it's going to cost to make those changes, which was part of the reason I want to take that up. But maybe more importantly and more to the point, same question with the election commission, like, what changes? Like, do we send the sheriff to the to the schools and take control of their finances? Like, are tanks, is the state going to roll the National Guard here and be like, you aren't in compliance with the 81 Act and we're taking control? Like, what happens? What actually happens?
My understanding that with, as currently it's in play, and I believe this came from the law director email or somewhere, so correct me if I'm wrong, law director, is we've got the two acts in place, the 2012 and the amended 2019. That, if it's specifically spelled out in those, then that's the direction. If there's anything that's vague or it's not spelled out, then it reverts back to the 81 Act.
Right, but what
Yeah, so-
what physical things change? What physical things change? Like this is
I mean, it
paper.
would answer the question. One thing about the new finance director. There's two ways of handling it. The 81 says that the financial management committee gets to select, and then versus the mayor bringing up yeah.
Here's the
Beyond that,
well, there's a big
I'm not
one.
really sure.
Well, I think there's a big one. It's the elephant in the room, like, and it's the schools.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right. So,
We already talked about, yeah.
So there's a reason I was bringing this up earlier, because I really want to know what the implications of this are. The cost implications of it are. So we all go in like it. We are not acting. It is clear to me that we are not acting in accordance with the 1981 Act right now when it comes to consolidation of our school budget. We're not. Period. That is a fact.
Yeah, because there's a action and approved.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it was intentional. I'm not saying anybody's ill. I'm just saying we are not. So if we do this vote, we are not in accordance. How are we going to be forced to do that? And how are we going to enforce that onto the schools? Like, what levers get pulled? That's what I want to understand.
What's enforcement? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like, how do we do it?
Okay. Well, the number one problem I see internally is policies, is creating sound policies for these management acts and enforcing them. It's just not been done. And once you get the policy going and the policy's in line with whatever the act is, then you notify everybody that's not in compliance with the policy and the act that they're not. And worst case scenario, it becomes an issue that goes in front of the courts. And then they get a court order, the county gets a court order that instructs
Okay.
that party to do A, B, and C.
The committee is responsible for writing the policies. I'm responsible for enforcing them. And I can insist right now, I've sent down whole portions, but they've never got adopted. So that's kind of where we're at. The policy, it's really up to the committee to adopt
Which
policies.
committee?
Financial Management Committee under the 81.
That's fine.
Under the
Sure.
12, you've got the subcommittee going to the Financial Management Committee. So right now, everything's been stopping at the subcommittee. So there's a big argument here. Does the subcommittee exist anymore? If the 81, for a better word, trumps it, then the stuff needs to go directly to financial management. They need to adopt it. So there's not clear which ones, if the 81's trumping it, financial management needs to adopt all the policies.
If there's a conflict, I believe it goes away to 81.
So
If it's not addressed or stricter, you go with the 2012.
So the thing is, request me to help them write the policies, we write them, but remember, once you adopt the policies, I'll enforce them, and that's what you gotta do. Where do you wanna go with it?
If the 81's silent on something, or the policy that was created creates a more restrictive aspect, then you would go with, I use employment law as a good example. When in doubt, go in favor of the employee as far as you paying them and things of that nature. So when in doubt, if it's stricter and harder to go the route of the 2012 versus the 81, and it's usually more because it's a gray area. But the most important part of all of this is the fact if the 81's silent, you have latitude to create whatever policy you want around it. Therefore, the 2012 kicks in, and you can go under the 2012 in those situations because the 81 doesn't address
The
it.
81 was silent, didn't address it, and then 2012, I mean, to me, that sort of makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And if the 2012 is more strict than the 81 was, and that makes more logic to me that 2012 trumps it or whatever.
Yes.
Can't conflict though with the 81.
But if the 81 says this and the 12 says this,
It's 81.
why is that?
Because that's the only one that is actually statutorily accepted by the commission as far as.
2012 is as well.
It's a
They're both.
local.
But this is a public act as well. The other ones have all been private acts, which means they've been catered to specific counties or population bracketing.
General law is or a public act supersedes
Yes,
a private act if it contradicts it.
yes.
Because our 12 Act right now contradicts general law on continuing budgets by a whole month, so we go by general law. We already do that on several things.
Yeah, just point.
So one of the things that's missing off the table is the reason that they came up with the 81 and the reason they want that. I think it has, at some point, one of these acts has the word modernization in it. And we have centralization. The reason is that centralizing all our stuff is to increase internal controls, increase efficiencies, turn out a better product. The reason that they all came together with this 81 Act, we're not the first county to sit here and struggle with these items. I mean, we have counties that are under the 57 that also struggled and went that way.
I was under 57 before here.
So we're not the first ones that have struggled. Recently, I think it was 3 years ago, I was at a conference, maybe 2, and we gave a standing ovation, if I'm not wrong, to Ms. Butt, Mayor of Murray County, because they had just implemented the 81 and gotten it in. And we stood up, under the comptroller was up, and he wanted us all to stand up and give it up to Ms. Butt for getting it done. I spoke to her after. She couldn't have been happier. I spoke this last week with Charlie Curtis, our president of the County Commissions Association. I said, Charlie, I need some guidance. This is where we're at. He said, y'all know Charlie. He said a couple of jokes, and then he said, well, when I was the mayor back in 1984, I think he said, and it was one of the counties around Putnam County, and he said, I looked over at the other county, and they had a good organization, a good government. I wanted to be good like them, and they had the 81 in place, so I wanted the 81 in place. And I had to struggle, and we struggled with the schools, and we struggled, and he told me some stories of what happened. And he said, and then we got it in, and it was good. And that's what we did. I said, Charlie, what would you tell me? Got this private act, and I got this 81. He said, the 81, centralized it, and that's what I went with in today. So I would advise everybody, call Mr. Curtis. He'll tell you whatever he wants to. Ask him questions. He has a lot of great knowledge, but that's what I got from him. And then I want to tell you what's in the 81 also that I did not realize till a couple of meetings ago that the law director read it, and I asked him to read it twice to me. And if you recall, what I wanted to hear twice was the teeth in the 81. Could you tell us what happens if anybody stands in the way of the 81?
Are you talking about there are some criminal, there are criminal
I
statutes.
mean, that's the biggest thing to me in this, is everybody needs to understand the teeth in this. The teeth in our 12 amended by the 19 is we never have to do it. That's the teeth in that one. The teeth in the 81 are bringing our county forward to more tighter internal controls, best practices, more oversight, more transparency is in the 81. So one we never have to implement that has no teeth, and the other one that gives us, in my view, all the transparency, accountability, and efficiencies that we're lacking in a lot of areas. So I just want to bring that to the table so we don't see the boogeyman that's in the corner. And I want to let you know that other counties have been here and where they're at, and I reach out.
When was it that they stood up
Page
and gave
33
them
here.
laws?
Miss Butt.
How long ago was that?
What number is it? Which statute is it?
It's 521, 125, and it's on page 33. It's a misdemeanor.
I've got a different copy.
So, but real quick, so I want to make sure I understand. So that it was 2 years ago, they finally, whatever county it was, Murray County implemented the 1981 Act.
And I'm not sure if they got the vote through to start their implementation or if they had finished it. At this point, I just.
So, I mean, but even still, that's however many years that is.
What I
40
can,
years?
But what I can tell you, back,
So,
I don't know
That's a
when
couple
they
years
started
ago.
it. They could have just dumped their private and went that away.
but I mean, I don't know where the teeth is if it's 40 years later.
Here's the
And
part,
The-
want me to read, it's any official or employee of the county who fails or refuses to perform the duties required by this chapter, who fails to or refuses otherwise to conform to this chapter, commits a Class C misdemeanor and subject to removal from office or position. So basically an ouster. So that's just reading what was asked.
And that's,
That's, I don't know what teeth that is, but anyway.
Well, somebody, I think it was you, just brought up a good point too. If you don't accept this, that means nothing anyway. So, but unfortunately, we accepted it.
So hopefully back to Commissioner Schiff's question to the law director. So it ends up in the courts if we say that so-and-so has to comply. How does it get there? Is that an automatic because somebody's not complying, or does a lawsuit have to be triggered? Because that's 13 votes of the commission, right?
What would be automatic? I'm not understanding that.
That's what I don't see how it gets to the courts without a vote of the commission
Here's
to
the
get there.
Let's make sure.
Because that puts us back in no man's land. So I want to ask that question first.
I can answer this question, because I was being dramatic and rhetorical earlier. Here's the chain of events that would occur. If we were to, and this is again why I want to understand the cost of it before going. If we were to either adopt the 81 or assuming everything, well, if we were to adopt it again or fail to reject the 81, then at that point, what would happen, I think would happen is the Financial Management Committee would issue a directive to the Finance Department to consolidate all finances within the county. The Finance Department and build policies, to your points earlier, to that effect, consolidation, oversight of the schools in particular. And then the Finance Department there would be directives to the schools to bring those in. And if they, with the timetable associated with them and with funding associated with them, and if there were failure to comply, then that's when the county would have to take a vote to, let's take this to court.
Tell you exactly what happened last time.
So, well, I mean, if it contradicts what I'm fixing to say, that puts us right back in no man's land of not wanting to comply if you don't get 13 votes. If you're sitting there with non-compliance and you're.
it didn't go that far last time. Financial Management Act got adopted, you have the Financial Management Committee. Brought forth an implementation plan, you have 7 members. For it, you got 4 commissioners, you got the director of schools at the time, I think it was county executive time, it's been mayor, county executive back and forth. And director of schools, so you've got, when they voted for the implementation plan, because some of them weren't happy, the schools and the highway automatically voted against it. The mayor voted for it, but you needed a majority vote, but you didn't get enough of the commissioners. You had 1 commissioner that everybody knew was probably going to be against it, and 3 for it. Well, one of the 3 for it got upset and went the other direction and never got voted in.
So I wasn't asking about
So there wasn't enough
financial management voting for it. I was talking about the court action.
You've got to go
Get
that
past
far.
the stumbling block.
I cannot
You can't get
initiate a
that
case
far.
without commission approval.
That's my point. So it's gonna, even if we agree to repeal,
You didn't get that far.
no, I'm saying Monday night, if we agree to if we don't agree to repeal by majority vote, then we try to force implementation because we're obviously still under it, and they don't comply, then you're back to needing a vote to take action on it, and we're probably not going to get 13 votes to sue anybody to go after that. So it puts us back in no man's land where we are right now.
I think we need to wrap it up. Good.
Mr. Long, this week you told me some new information I did not realize, and if you could elaborate on it or tell me if I got it correct or not. I was surprised when you said while y'all were working on it, that you had all of the schools AP over.
We did it one time, yes.
And I know that I've seen in insurance, we brought the schools in, or we were all in insurance because we're still paying those those policies, those workers' comp
Well,
schools?
at one time, the
How
county,
much were you able and how long did it take you to,
well, we were actually combining financial systems at the time, so there was several things happening. Sumner County here at the time, when we adopted the financial management system, did not have an IT department. One of the things requested with the Financial Management Act was an IT department. The solution was to give me 2 IT employees. So we set up the ERP system and we did all those things. We actually combined, we got an IT department after that because it kept growing and it was taking up 30-40% of my time. Couldn't get my other job done, and that was my biggest complaint. I didn't care to do it, but it was becoming problematic. So we created an ERP system. We brought over the school's purchasing, and it was running fine. The problem we were having was more of an IT infrastructure. So at the time things just switched around and they pulled them back. I mean, did anybody really have the votes? They just pulled it back. And then they did the 2019 amendment after that.
All right, so we already made a motion earlier in the meeting to ask the financial management committee to figure out the cost, the timeline, the projections. We've got an IT director now, if he needs to get involved, whatever. But we've already made that motion. So unless there's any other motions surrounding anything we've talked about recently,
Can I,
before we do that though, Mr. Lauder.
if somebody could, if it doesn't come out of this, it needs to come out of either budget or financial management, but we've got to clean up the policy and procedures because we specifically call it the 2012 Financial Committee. And we need to just get 2012 out of it. I don't know why we had to be that specific before, but just that language needs to come out. So regardless of what we morph into, that's still valid language.
There were, I don't know if it's still this way or not, but I know when I was financial management chair a few years back, there were 2 different committees. We met at the same time. And we had 1980, whatever it was, this committee and the 2012 committee. And our meetings were both meetings. It's really strange, but that's how it was.
Your appropriation resolution this whole time has always said 1981 and 2012.
So it's like 2 different committees
You've always had
currently
both of those.
voting on everything.
I just want to speak to this. I don't want to change anything until after we take that vote and find out what's going to happen. And personally, I don't want to take that vote until I know what the cost is, but we'll fight that fight on the
and
floor.
I know we're wrapping this out, but I'd like to take you back to financial management. We decided to stop debating it and let the commission make a decision. And now you want us to cost it out before we get a decision. We're just, I understand what you're saying, but.
I mean, I just want the numbers before I make the decision.
Well, and you're hunting for a finance director too.
I'm happy to make a decision. I just want to go in with all the information. Motion to adjourn.
Before we do that, circling back around to this meeting with the representative from Controller's office and the Secretary of State office.
We mean comptroller, right? Comptroller's
Yeah,
office.
I was just reading my
The
right.
comptroller's
Yeah, the
office or the
comptroller.
comptroller, since he's one of the
Right, but I just, somebody said controller, and
Yeah,
I just want to make sure I was
was
right.
reading the scratch.
Okay.
Sorry. We talked about getting that meeting scheduled. Do we want to, and I had mentioned this, let's get to the end of the meeting before we made a decision there. Do we want to set a date to meet again for that specific meeting?
I think we have to wait, right? Like we have to wait to find out what the state's availability is.
Well,
We
yeah,
could
I
give them
Otherwise,
time
we're just
and see
gonna,
if they can make it though.
otherwise we're just gonna do this again. I think we can just wait to see what they come back and they.
So what, if you all are fine, Mr. Sittler can make the conversation and reach out, and I'll work with him on a date, make sure it works for everybody, okay? All right. Moving, all right.
Which one?
What's one of these?
We'll get them for the minutes.
If we don't, if we